Today's edition of AM Minnesota. We've got a very interesting program today, not that we don't every day, but James Marthaler is with us from the Rice County Department of Social Services. What is your title specifically, Jim?
I am the supervisor responsible for our mental health professional and children's mental health.
And boy, I was looking at the statistics preparing for today's show. It's alarming when you see the numbers.
It is, Gordy. In my short 4-year time with Rice County, even just in the 4 years, I've seen a significant increase in the need for mental health services in our communities in Rice County.
And there probably aren't enough people that are able to provide the services.
You know, there are not. And with the Affordable Care Act and more people getting coverage, we're seeing even more and more people step forward and ask for help, which is really a positive thing. Generally at social services, our mental health professionals have historically only seen people who don't have insurance, any kind of coverage, because we don't want to take away business livelihood from people in the community, therapists who are earning a living. But we are starting to take more and more people with some kind of coverage because they're contacting a professional in town and it's 8 or 12 weeks before they can get their first session. So we are dealing with a lot more crisis situations because we can see them more quickly usually.
The main reason we asked James to be with us today on AM Minnesota is they started something about a year ago whereby they will go virtually anywhere to help people suffering from a mental health crisis.
Correct, Gordy. We now have what we call our mobile crisis response service. Individuals throughout Rice County who find themselves or a loved one struggling with a mental health crisis can call this number. A licensed mental health professional will answer the phone, and if it is a serious situation needing an immediate response, a team of 2 staff will respond to wherever the person is and help them get through their crisis in the moment. We provide this service from noon to 8 p.m. 365 days a year. And the reason we have only that window, when I wrote the grant last year, I had written it for 24-hour-a-day coverage, of course. And of course you never get what you ask for when you write a grant. So what I did is I gathered data from the local emergency rooms at the hospitals, all our law enforcement, our Rice County crisis line, and over 80% of the mental health related calls were coming in between that noon to 8 p.m. window. So that's when we have the service available right now.
And were you finding a significant number of mental health calls?
Yes, significant is an understatement. We have had responses. When I wrote this grant, I should explain, the state wants you to do it as a region, start serving large populations. So the grant serves a 10-county area. We are the eastern border, and then it goes to the southwest. And Rice County, it being one of the 10 counties, we have responses at least 2 or 3 days a week just in our communities.
So how do we rank with those 10 counties?
We rank at the top with Blue Earth County, the Mankato area.
That would make some sense because it's the 2 most populous of the counties you're mentioning, right?
Correct.
So those numbers do correlate.
Yes.
We're going to take a little break here, then we're going to come back and visit with James some more about this. I found an interesting Northwestern University study. It's a small study, but we'll talk about it on AM Minnesota. It's amazing to me. They're tracking people's phones and determining whether or not they have depression. They had an 87% accuracy in making that diagnosis. Isn't that amazing? Now,
yes.
You know, they don't intrude into your lives. You're just using your phone anyway, and they can, through your phone sensor data. I just find it amazing. We're going to talk to Jim about that when AM Minnesota continues with them on their website, northlandbuildings.com. James Marthaler is with me. He's a supervisor of the mental health unit at Social Services Department here in Rice County. They have a mobile crisis response team now that goes out and goes right on the location of wherever the person might be when they're suffering their mental health issue. And we're talking the whole gamut right here.
Correct. Any mental health related crisis. And sometimes our calls have been from individuals who are alone and struggling with depression or anxiety. Sometimes it's couples. Sometimes it's a parent with a child that they're concerned about their safety because of mental health. So the mental health umbrella covers a broad spectrum of needs people have in the community.
And you said when you started your position about 4 years ago and saw that we didn't have this, and I think you were telling us earlier that most counties in the state do have this sort of thing. I thought maybe Rice County was a pioneer, but nothing doing.
Not quite. I was talking to you earlier, Gordy, and I started with Rice County about 4 years ago, and in my first year, because I am in the mental health field, I came to realize that that was a realm that we were failing to provide a service to our community. Rice County has our own crisis line, which takes after-hours calls for any kind of crisis at all. And yet those people answering that phone are social workers from Rice County, not always highly trained in mental health. And so I began looking and found this grant through the state of Minnesota, and we've been up and running. We received the grant we've been up and running now for about a year. And you're right, about 90% of the state of Minnesota already had this service through this grant, and they've had it for over 10 years. Hopefully we'll have it for 10 years more.
But it is a grant.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Which means the funding could be pulled at any time.
It could, and yet I don't want to open up a service that's only available for a year. That wouldn't be fair to the community.
Right.
And so I did a lot of research. I spoke to Hennepin County, St. Louis County, I spoke to DHS, and they all assured me that this funding has been steady or increasing over the last 10-year period, and they see no end to it at this point.
And from what you were saying earlier, it sounds like it's making a difference.
I believe we are. I've even had a phone call from an individual who used the mobile crisis team, called me and stated that we had saved her life. You know, and in my field, in the mental health realm, you rarely hear that kind of thing. You rarely hear that. And to have somebody from this community call after they had received the service and been helped to say that really meant a lot. And it even made me more resolute in making sure this service continues to be available to the community.
This is for children as well as adults.
Yes, it is. It's for children and adults. So anybody suffering from a mental health related crisis.
And we're seeing, according to the numbers I've read from the Mental Health Association, an increase in
Absolutely.
issues that children are dealing with.
Yeah, we are. We are seeing, I'm also responsible for our children's mental health unit. And when I started 4 years ago at the county, Gordy, out of the 100 cases we are supervising at any given time, I would say we had one case that I would have considered extreme, where the child, the emotional damage, the needs were so significant that it was worrisome. Today, 4 years later, I cannot count the number of cases we have that would meet that criteria. The sad thing for me about the children's mental health is that rarely is that a classic mental illness as we might think of it. Someone who generations before them have had depression and they end up with it kind of genetically, and rarely do we see children like that who are schizophrenic or psychotic in some way. The vast majority of children we see, it is some kind of an environmental issue that has led to them having such severe emotional problems.
Abuse.
Yeah, or some form of trauma. You know, they've witnessed abuse in the home, they've been abused in the home, they've lost a parent, they've been removed from the home. Some form of trauma in that child's life has resulted in the child having the needs they do today.
It's a trigger of sorts.
Yes.
That incident triggers something in the brain.
Yeah, it does, and it goes untreated for years and years. You know, the child is seen as a behavior problem in school, and I truly believe that all behaviors from those children are simply symptoms. I don't know that I've ever met a child who's just really a bad kid, who's intentionally and thoughtfully bad. Children, their behaviors are normally a symptom, a cry for help.
And you're not born that way, you're saying?
No, absolutely not. We're not born that way. Rarely, I should say. There is that small, in my experience at Rice County, about 1% of the children who literally are born with a miswiring in their brain, chemical imbalance in their brain. And we do rarely see children like that. But the vast majority, it is some kind of an environmental factor.
Is the majority of cases you deal with depression?
I would say more than any other diagnosis, yeah, depression, anxiety, those two are right up there.
We're high anxiety about?
A lot of young people, a lot of children, the social pressures that they feel today.
Well, think about it. I mean, I think you're about the same vintage there, James.
Yeah.
We didn't have Facebook or
right.
Any of the social media where you can get bullied and don't even have to directly confront the person.
Right, right. And when I was in high school, Gordy, I mean, I was a farm kid. Blue jeans and a t-shirt, I think, is all I ever wore to high school. Today, there are pressures on kids that, thank God, I didn't have to deal with when I was growing up. But a lot of these pressures are more than they can cope with.
Yeah, they're what they're wearing to school, as you said.
Right, right. The wrong haircut, the wrong car, living in the wrong neighborhood, not having a cell phone, all those things.
Incredible. And when you bring up the cell phones, this Northwestern study I found really amazing, and it's pretty recent. I mean, they just published it yesterday. Just published it yesterday on the Journal of Medical Internet Research. It's from Northwestern. It's a Northwestern medicine study. Depression can be detected from your smartphone sensor data by tracking the number of minutes you use the phone and your daily geographical location. The more time you spend using your phone, the more likely you are depressed, it says. Average daily usage for depressed individuals was about an hour and 8 minutes, and the average for non-depressed individuals, 17 minutes a day.
Absolutely. And Gordy, I think this goes back to something you and I were talking about earlier, is that ability to make a human connection. The bond you have with others. If I'm depressed, I was blessed enough to be one of 10 kids. I have an amazing wife and 2 beautiful sons. I would talk to somebody in my family. But a lot of people don't have that human connection. And we're seeing more and more children. You go into a waiting room today, a doctor's office, dentist office, grocery store, and instead of a child being read to or interacting with their parent, the child is sitting there on the smartphone or an iPad. And I've seen children as young as 18 months, 2 years old, that if you take the iPad or smartphone away, they go crazy. They cry and cry until they get it back. And it does not promote imagination, human connection, ability to interact socially. I'm not saying that those things are entirely bad, but they need to be used appropriately.
Yeah, regulated in terms of usage.
Right,
Don't
right.
go overboard. Anything in moderation, right?
Right, and even the video games, again, you know, when, again, you and I are of that age where when we were growing up, it was Monopoly or ping pong or something where you were having human interaction. But kids today, again, they're even having in the DSM, which is the manual giving diagnoses for mental health, they're diagnosing people with mental illnesses based on video games and cell phone usage, because they're losing their ability to have social interaction and to cope with other people, and they're having more of a connection with electronics.
So if I'm hearing you correctly here, and quite often I don't hear correctly,
Okay.
James, that's one of the problems I have, but if I'm hearing you correctly, the advice you would give to parents is to school your youth in using these devices appropriately. For example,
Absolutely.
don't let them bring the device to the dinner table.
Right.
That teaches them when you're having dinner, you're not on the phone.
Right. You're interacting with your family. Right. And the way we raised our sons, and not that this is perfect, believe me, but we had a set amount of time they could use electronics. You know, they had an hour to play video games when they came home from school. And so not using it as a babysitter. And I know that's rather cliche, Gordy, but I do see that with great frequency. Instead of interacting with their child when they take them to bed at night, reading them a book, people are using it as a babysitter. And it is all of this I'm talking about is based on that human connection for me. First and foremost, there needs to be that human connection between you and your child, between your child and their siblings, between your child and their friends, their grandparents. And if they're spending more time on electronics than they are with loved ones, with people, we're going down an unhealthy path.
Yeah, and I think we're almost there, aren't we?
We are.
I mean, I see it all the time. I, broadcast ball games, and I'll see people in the stands, kids in the stands, not just kids, adults too, constantly on their cell phones. They're not watching the game. You're at a game, watch the game. Don't be watching your cell phone.
Right, and I am an eternal optimist, and I don't mean to be the harbinger of doom here, but I worry about our society in the United States.
But I was mentioning to James earlier, before we started the program today, sometimes we get a chance to chat before the air waves hit, sometimes we don't. I appreciate James coming in a little early. We were able to chat. I was telling him earlier that I think that there ought to be classes in maybe middle school, maybe even earlier than that, to teach kids about proper usage of these devices.
Absolutely, and as I was saying, Gordy, there are schools in Minnesota, in the United States, and across Canada, actually, where children in elementary school, social skills are part of their everyday academics. And I think this is a sad swing in our pendulum. When I went to school, it was strictly academics. Right. My social skills were taught at home, manners, eating etiquette, etc. Today, that's not the role we ask from our educators, which is sad, but it is the way it is. And schools that implement this kind of programming find great success in it.
Hopefully it'll make a difference. So again, if people want to access this mobile crisis unit.
Yes, the number I actually have is 877-399-3040. And again, the mobile crisis team is available 365 days a year from noon to 8 p.m. The number will always be answered, but the team is only available to come out from noon to 8 p.m. 7 days a week.
Would you recommend if you dial 911, will they send out this team?
911 would probably just give you this number, would be my understanding.
Oh, okay.
We've worked very closely, and I have to say, put a plug in for the Northfield and Faribault Police and the Rice County Sheriff, and both the District 1 ER and the Northfield Hospital ER. They have worked very closely with us and are helping us getting this program up and running.
Well, think about this. They see this every day.
Yep.
They realize that a lot of the calls they go on deal with mental health issues.
Yes, and those individuals, as skilled as they are in their fields, they are not trained to help someone having a mental health related crisis. And so we have even responded to the emergency departments at hospitals.
Yeah, one of the things you brought up earlier when we were chatting before going on the air, imagine if you're having a panic attack and all of a sudden the sirens are coming, you know, closer and closer. I mean, that's not going to help you if you're suffering from a panic attack.
Right, right. And the mental health response team, again, will respond to wherever somebody is comfortable. We've responded to emergency rooms, to restaurants, to parks, or to people's homes if that's where they're comfortable.
Getting back to that Northwestern study, I don't know if I told you or not, but 87% accuracy identifying people with depression through just looking at their phone data.
Right. Actually, in the state of Minnesota is starting a thing right now, Gordy. It's not available in our county yet, but it's called Text for Life, because we are finding for younger people especially, they maybe don't want to talk to someone on the phone when they're feeling suicidal or depressed, but they will text back and forth with people. Matter of fact, about a year ago, for my staff, I had to make sure they all had smartphones, because a lot of the youth we're working with and helping, they won't answer their phone when it rings, or they won't call you back, but they will text immediately. And so a lot of our work is done with texting, that and face-to-face contact.
Well, there again is that human connection, though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we promote the face-to-face contact as much as possible, but we will always meet clients where they're coming from. And if they're not comfortable meeting face-to-face at that moment, texting is the next best thing.
It's got to be hard, though, as a mental health professional to understand exactly what they're feeling if you can't hear them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is never replacing actual therapy or a face-to-face contact. But again, there are some people who don't want to have contact with you right now. For whatever reason, don't want to see you. And if we can at least have that texting contact, we will.
I found the information about this study on the Mental Health Association of Minnesota website. If you want to look at it further, folks, it says here the smartphone data was more reliable in detecting depression than daily questions that participants answered about how sad they were feeling on a scale of 1 to 10. I find that amazing.
Yeah. Very true, because behavior is more indicative than self-report. You and I, just being human, we almost always want to make ourselves look better, or maybe we want to make ourselves look worse. We rarely see ourselves accurately.
Actions speak louder than words.
There you go.
Proof's right there.
Yep.
Actions speak louder than words. And I was wondering about the mobility of it too, and they say if you don't go many places, stay home a lot, you have a loss of motivation, that's a sign of depression.
Absolutely. We call it isolating behavior. The less and less frequently people have contact with people, the more likely it is that they are struggling with some type of severe emotional disturbance.
The numbers are a smidgen. 28 people, 20 females, 8 males were used for this, average age 29 over 2 weeks.
But I really think it's indicative, Gordy, I really do. I think that it is very indicative of what we see in the field.
Some of the statistics I looked up and I found alarming, and I think you folks probably will too. It says here 2 times more females attempt suicide as compared to males.
Yeah, that's pretty, I would say that's pretty accurate for what we see in this community. And I think, Gordy, it's important for me to say, there is no stereotypical person that we see. We see doctors, lawyers, law enforcement, people who are unemployed. We serve people at social services at any given moment from across the spectrum of this community.
So you're not seeing a common denominator?
No.
Like, obviously social status doesn't matter.
No. No, not in any way. And this is
Chemical
true.
abuse?
CD issues, I would say, are very similar. We don't see a specific socioeconomic group coming to us more often than any other. It is from across this community that people are coming to us for help. And I'm just grateful that we're there.
According to statistics I looked up nationally, 8.5% of children, 6.2 million, suffer from an emotional, behavioral, or developmental issue. 1.6 million, or 6.48%, have a substance abuse problem. 2.1 million, or 8.6%, report having at least one major depressive episode in a year, and 8.01% of youth report having attempted suicide once in the last year.
Yes. And oftentimes, individuals, especially younger people, who are drinking or experimenting with drugs, what we say, Gordy, is they're self-medicating. There is some mental health issue going on there that is so painful or uncomfortable, they are taking any precaution they can not to feel it, whether it's stealing pills out of the cabinet or drinking alcohol. It numbs the pain.
Yeah, issues we need to deal with, and of course Rice County's doing it by jumping on board with the crisis mobile unit. You want to give out that number for us, James?
Sir, 877-399-3040, and available 365 days a year from noon to 8 p.m.
Everybody needs to put that phone number in their phone. You never know when you might need the service.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
It can happen to any one of us.
Yep. Or a friend, and you can give the number out. Absolutely.
Just as you can break an arm, you can have a mental health episode.
Absolutely.
Nervous breakdown, whatever the case might be.
Yeah, and more legally, that's how we're looking at mental illness, the same as any other illness.
That's good. We've come a long way there, right?
Yes, we have. Yes,
All right.
we have.
Hey, thanks, James, for coming. I appreciate it. Hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Thank you, Gordy.
James Marthaler from the Rice County Department of Social Services. Tomorrow, Dr. Annette Parker, president of South Central College. You're in tune to